that these great people have developed to really aid the the student population, I guess the population of students with autism. It's just pretty fascinating. The research is fascinating. Um, it's you have to look into it. I won't take up this session, but please look into it. It's pretty fascinating.
Yeah, I am definitely gonna take a look when I have a little bit of time today,
Yeah.
because it sounds amazing. And we have Jessica and Laurel and Anima Cassius, who joined us here. Thank you so much for joining us today. And
Yeah,
Anima,
welcome everyone.
if I mispronounced your name, you could please correct me in how I said your name. Okay. Um, Steve, would you like to get started?
You bet. I did start the recording because I found the button and I thought I should push it when I saw it rather than try to remember where to find it again.
Yes.
So thank you everyone for joining us. Let me just jump into the presentation and share what Valerie and I want to present to you. We are using Sway to present today. Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where in the world you are. My name is Dr. Steve McGriff. I love working in higher education. I love working with our K-12 teachers through our Q organization. And Valerie is a wonderful colleague, and we've been EdTech colleagues and partners for about 3 years doing presentations together. I'm an independent consultant, and I have an adjunct faculty role at Foothill Community College in the Los Altos Hills in California. So I'm in Northern California. Valerie, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, everybody. My name is Valerie. I am also an independent consultant in dual immersion and EdTech integration. But I was a former dual immersion teacher teaching in kindergarten, and now I teach part-time at Occidental College in the World Languages program, in the World Languages project, sorry, and also at Cal State LA in the Division of Applied and Advanced Studies in Education. And I love EdTech, and being able to blend EdTech with pedagogy is kind of my jam. And then add a dual immersion on top of that. It's like my favorite things all together. And to get to do this with Steve and present on this is just an amazing thing. So we're so happy that you are here to share this time with us.
Valerie, you're like an elite ninja because you can do the dual immersion thing. And what, you speak like 3 languages or 4?
4, 3.5. My Spanish isn't enough.
Yeah, but I bet you can get by through a Spanish market, right?
Yes, I can.
So Valerie and I are also a part of the Q organization. Specifically, we work within a learning network called the Q Higher Education Learning Network, and we'll share more about that at the end of our presentation. Valerie gave you an idea that we're basically in a discussion with you. We're going to show some things, but we want to talk about some things, and we'd like your feedback on some ideas. We came up with this phrase, EdTechogogy. It is what we want to describe as blended and online lesson design. And while she and I might focus on higher education, we know what goes on in K-12. Valerie has been teaching in K-12. My wife is a K-12 teacher, and we have great insight through our friends, through our experiences in training teachers. So we can answer your questions by grade levels as well. We thought that instead of just a sit and get or sit and try kind of a presentation, we would make this an opportunity to have a conversation with you. And since we are learning so much more about how to teach online, we're going to focus on what does it take to build a community online? Because community online is one of the key factors for student success. And the second major part of what we want to talk with you about today is how might we go about designing the instruction that we want to deliver that uses both educational technologies, but still matches it up with good pedagogy so that we can achieve the learning outcomes that we hope for. Is there more to add to that, Valerie? Do you have some insight you want to share with our audience?
Well, since I mean, the idea of this was a panel discussion. So since there aren't so many of us, we would just love to have you converse with us and what you need and ask us questions as well. And just feel free to unmute your mics to talk with us.
You bet. Building that sense of community. The link in the middle of the page, Best Practices for Online Teaching, is a self-directed lesson that I created to walk through a learning process. In essence, it's an elaborate hyperdoc built into a slide presentation. So there are links to click on, videos to watch, and activities to engage in learning. But rather than walk you through a self-directed lesson, I pulled out some of the key points and I want to present them to you, but also I need to pause and just say, do you all have questions right now? An anticipation of what you might hear, something you want to hear before I kick into gear with some best practices for online teaching. You can chat or unmute yourself and let us know.
Hi, Steve, it's Darylyn.
Hi,
Oh, Darylyn.
Hi, question. Are we able to get this self-directed lesson after so that we can do it, and can we share it with our colleagues?
Yes, you may share it with your colleagues, and yes, there's a link to the Sway, but I forgot to put it into the presentation. So Valerie and I will figure out how to get the Sway link and put it in the chat for you to access
Okay,
at
perfect.
the end.
All right,
Sound
perfect.
good?
Thank you.
Other questions? So heads up, Valerie, I am totally blind to the video gallery and the chat. All I can see right now, it doesn't matter that I have two monitors, right? If you don't know how to get the windows to go in the right places, this is why you bring your best friend along and you say, could you monitor the chat and stuff for me?
Of course, I am definitely monitoring the chat.
Thank you. So the introduction to best practices for online teaching and learning is derived from a book that I read. I needed to get up to speed about a year ago, very quickly for helping. I needed to coach higher education faculty on developing courses in Canvas. And I had always had a hesitation about doing online teaching. So I bought this one book. It was thin. I said, oh, a thin book. This is great. I can read this. And it's called like Excellence in Online Teaching. And it was like only 80 pages. And it was so easy to read. And he made so many great practical points. I pulled out a few of them to share with you. One of the first things is, what's the attitude and demeanor and tone that an online teacher needs in order to build community? So keep this framework in mind. We're trying to build a good, robust, and helpful learning community for ourselves as instructors and also for our students. So here are 4 essential qualities of an awesome online teacher. Having compassion for where your audience is and what they might be going through. You don't always get to see them, so you don't always know what's going on in their lives as they become online learners. Listening to them as they either talk in synchronous sessions or as they extend messages to you. Being available during times of the week when you're teaching the class so that you could informally speak with them or have time to formally reply to emails or communications that they might be offering you. Flexibility. Teaching an online class before kind of as the pandemic occurred required a great deal of flexibility as everybody's life changed in some way. And students weren't always able to complete assignments on time. So I had to reevaluate what was the importance of a timely assignment versus a done assignment, done with quality. So flexibility helps to extend.
Oops, Steve.
Please go ahead.
I would
Yeah.
also like to add in a fifth element, which is grace. And in our
Yes.
time right now, I think we really do need a lot of grace for our students. Just like the flexibility that needs to be there. This morning, I received a message from one of my friends who is a teacher, and it was her daughter's first day of online learning, and she was like, "Oh my gosh, the teacher is 10 minutes late to our Google Meet meeting, and this is just not a good sign of how to start the first day of school," right?
Okay. Yes.
10 minutes later, she was like, "My frustration was on operator error. My daughter was on the wrong link." And so the teacher was
Oh,
there. They got confused with the link, and she was like, "I can't believe I put down the teacher." So it was like an immediate of like, they were so frustrated and had this, localized vision of like, I was in the right place, right time. But then, there was just like error in communication, right? Her daughter clicked on the wrong link thinking that it was going to be the correct link,
yeah.
so we definitely need grace. And the fact that my friend was like, pulled herself back immediately, was like, "Oh my gosh, you know I can't believe I said that, I critiqued the teacher that way without thinking of all of the other possibilities that could have been there." um, Showed a lot of, self-reflection on her end, right, as a teacher as
That
well.
was really that was
So
really helpful. It's understandable under the pressure that she as a mom was feeling for the sake of her
mhm,
daughter. Um, when our brains get hijacked by an emotional reaction, we are not working off of the frontal lobe where we can be creative and flexible in our thinking. We retreat um, to the center part of our brain where we're in the fight or flight mode. And that once our brain gets hijacked, it becomes very difficult to begin thinking, what are all the possibilities of why this is happening, and
mhm,
staying calm. So what
yeah.
a wonderful example of what we need to bring in as a teacher under the pressure of working with technology tools, as well as what our audience is doing, trying to work with technology tools and connect with us. One of the challenges of teaching online is how do you get your course started? Well, one of the first things to really consider is, besides building out great content, what did you do in the design of your course to create a sense of community? For when we're teaching face-to-face, every school year starts with teachers establishing the norms and patterns of behavior, classroom decorum that they want students to engage, to understand, respect, and participate in. In an online world, it starts with you as the instructor sending out messages of trying to build community, sending them a welcome message, and creating an opportunity for students to engage with one another. One of the most fantastic tools for creating engagement at the get-go is Flipgrid. And Flipgrid gives the small little video introductions or short video introductions that students can make and then reply to. Of course, it should start with your video introduction before any of your students do anything more. When communicating, so is there any feedback on that particular idea? Something you might want to share about getting a class started and doing introductions at the beginning?
So this is something that is you want to think about for your grade levels, depending on the grades that you teach, right? And I realized we didn't ask that question in our chat this morning because
Oh,
I forgot to
yeah.
ask that. But for us kindergarten teachers, I just saw a teacher use all of the Snapchat filters yesterday for her introduction. She started off as a frog. She's like, "Is this what my teacher looks like?" And then she switched it to another one, was like, "Maybe this is what my teacher looks like." So it's like from frog filter to dog filter to all of these other filters. And like, can you take a guess? What does your teacher look like? And then she finished it off with herself, like, "Hello, this is me, and I'm so excited to
Wow.
meet you." So what a great way to connect, like to be at the kindergarten kids levels, right? To meet them where they're at and have this guessing game, to kind of really build up meeting their teacher. So I thought that was a really cool thing.
Thanks, Val.
You're welcome. And yay, you found the chat in Teams.
So, dear friends who are joining us in this session, Valerie and I are new to Teams. 3 days ago, we did an evening run through just to figure out how her presentation yesterday would come together. So we're exploring and learning these different parts and pieces of Teams. So now today's my turn. And I'm going, well, wait a minute, what happened to such and such? And how come I can't see this when I do? So I went back over into Teams and I said, oh, look, there's a chat stream located in my Teams application, and there you all are. Simply to say, doesn't matter how often or long or whatever level of expertise you have in this, there's more to learn, more to learn. Here are 4 strategies for some effective online communication with your learners. You know, you can insert emoticons or emojis or bitmojis into your communication channels with your students. Adds a little bit of humor or emphasis to the message that you want to communicate. Also allows for more visual expression when normally it's just text. I don't believe you can actually over communicate when you cannot be face-to-face with your students. You can't use your body language. You can't use the normal classroom routines. Communicate frequently. And to whatever extent, when you're synchronous with your students, use their names. I would like to imagine that anytime any of us responds to a student's email, we actually address it to the student, like hello, first name. Read carefully first is similar to the story that Valerie shared a second ago, which is the friend who is the mom didn't have the full understanding of what was going on. She missed a message somewhere. So when we receive messages as teachers from our students, be sure to read the details of what is that student saying and carefully understand what are they asking for or what issues do they need your help with before you begin to reply.
Can I jump back to using emoticons, Steve?
Yes,
So
please.
when you are organizing your online learning experience for your students, emoticons help a lot. And I got this from a Canvas tutorial that I saw. So when the teacher posted information, she actually had like the learning aspects. So she had a little light bulb in front of the slides that were all for learning. And then she had like a fist or a high five up for assignments that they needed to do. So it was like hand up, you really got to pay attention, slow down, you got to do this, right? And then she had another one that was like for further development. So she was like, it's the extras. So she put an avocado because, guac is extra when you have to, you got to pay extra for guac, right? So the avocado meant extra exploration that they wanted to do. So
That's funny.
So then when you see it, you can see right away, just based on the emoticons, what are the action items, what are the learning items, and what are the extra items, so that it doesn't get boggled up in all of the text that is there in your Canvas or your stream. Okay.
I like that. I'm sorry. Can you repeat that again? What are the action items?
So the action items are like the assignments that you want your students to do, right? So like maybe during you have a formative assessment. You're like, I need you to write down your 5 big ideas that you got from the lesson, So it was like a little hand up like this, or like a check mark. She was like, choose whichever emoticon works best for you, right? Maybe it's a check, so that they know that's the item that they have to do. Does that make sense? So for my students,
right.
I used a little pencil. You know how there's an emoticon with the paper and pencil? So I use that emoticon as the assignments that I want my students to do. So when they see my weekly or my sessions, they see the little play sign for the recording of the webinar. And then they see a little slide deck emoji for a slide deck. Oh, I used a journal one actually for the slide deck, and then the pencil for assignments that they need to do to that they have to click through, that they have to turn in.
I like that.
And it's just like a first view kind of thing, right? So I know right away, instead of trying to decipher through the text, which are the items that I need to do, that I need to read, and which are the extras. Yes, Steve, establishing your norms with emoticon symbols. You're always so good.
Learning a lot. Just watching the chat and picking up on ideas. Just real quickly about email. The best email starts with a really fantastic subject line. We often don't think about the power of a subject line, but it is the first thing that a recipient's going to see. So that's the first impression. Is there a call for action in your subject line? Is it something witty and humorous to capture their attention? I believe that when teachers begin to think like marketers, they can begin to tap into the social and emotional response that our students have to when they're watching commercials or following ads that pop up in their social media. When we begin to use those kinds of those language structures and the way they form phrases to capture attention, we're doing the best that we can to capture the attention of our audience. The best thing that you can do when you're working with students online is to facilitate the discussion. Don't just create the discussion and tell them to go do it. Get in there with them as they're forming and shaping ideas. Give them high fives and attaboys and way to go, girl, and yes. You don't have to elaborate on any of the content as much as support them in the approach that they are using to respond to your prompts or to respond to one another. You're facilitating a process of discussion. And what I recognize happens in discussions is if I start giving too much insight from my professional expertise, it shuts down the discussion because now the students are waiting for me to tell them. They're waiting for me to interact, but I need them to interact with one another in order to facilitate that community building and to get them to coach and guide. My job is to stand to the outside of it and say, here are the parameters and the boundaries. I encourage you to keep talking to each other. If you need a little help, why don't you try making a suggestion or offer a counterpoint? If you want a counterpoint, invite the other person to give one and encourage the group to talk to each other without overshadowing their interaction. Of course, this is, as Valerie said earlier, this is dependent upon what is the age of the students that you're working with. So as I think about higher education or high school, what I just suggested is easier than if you actually need to walk and model the process for middle school and elementary. Here's a funny little thing that the author, Aaron Johnson, wrote in his book, facilitating discussions and writing emails as part of a good habit is number 3, choosing the best time of the day. Haven't you gotten to the end of the day and you are dead tired? You've been in Zoom, you're zoomed out, you're videoed out, and you're just, let me answer these emails, and you're just dragging and drooping. That's a real bad time to answer emails. Do it fresh. Do it the best time that you have for the day, if that's the morning or the afternoon. Set aside a block of time and then rock the best emails and the best responses to discussions that you possibly can have. Let me talk about grading discussions and then open it back up to everyone for adding something more to our conversation. It gets overwhelming when you have discussions. If you have 30 students or more in class and they each need to post and then reply to one or two others, that is huge volume of discussion communication that you may feel obligated to have to respond to. The author of the book, and by this practice, I have learned, pay attention to the 20% of the students that really need your help. The 20% that really need your support. Get in, read what they're writing, give them guidance. The 80% will tend to take care of themselves. And I'm not saying it's a 28, it's the same students for every discussion, just the one that you're in. Which 20% of that group of responses seems to need your specific help and guidance? Pump them up. The other 80% will self-correct, and for the most part, they're doing really well anyway. So don't tire yourself out, but pace yourself so that you can manage the load of text and reading that you might need to do. And with that, let me pause and see either Valerie or anyone in the audience.
There are no questions in the chat for the moment.
Okay, chime in, text in, chat in. So again, this is related to comments I just made about 2080, which when replying to discussions, you are basically giving feedback. So establish boundaries for yourself to keep yourself healthy and well. Schedule a regular time. To whatever extent you could possibly use rubrics to automatize or to already have customized, to already have sets of language that you can respond to your students with would be really helpful. And in a very condensed fashion, I took a lot of chapters of the book, presented only a few to you in summary form. One of the greatest things that he finishes the book with that I know very well from experience: finish well, finish strong. While your students may be fading out at the end of a semester, at the end of a quarter, at the end of a grading period, or just before a holiday break, go strong. Just dig deep to find the extra energy to be very positive and to be very interactive with your students before you set them loose from your class.
So Steve, there was a question from Jessica. She said, how do you do this with the 2080 idea? How do you actually manage that with remedial students, right? So my idea is that because they are remedial students, you have to have a different idea in the type of goals you're setting for your students for that particular lesson. If it is, you know, in English, right, they're all having a hard time writing a full-on complete sentence. You know, you can go in and just, what is a simple sentence that they could write? So their goal for that day is to write a simple sentence that has subject, verb, objective, you know, and see what group can do, what part of the group can do that. And then we'll be able to have that 80 and 20%. They're not going to be, you know, they're in a remedial class because they're not there in that standardized area yet. So then you got to really just truncate and chunk the standard that you're trying to reach so that you could have that 80-20 almost in your classroom. I hope that helps, Jessica.
Valerie, your comment forced me to dig a little bit deeper with Jessica's question. So at one level, I was imagining in a remedial class, am I comparing them to what I think the regular class level would be? And then my remedial students are all in the 20%. And I said, no, I wouldn't do it that way. I would say, I'm just looking at my class. Which 20% of the students in whatever class I'm given are functioning below a minimum standard that I would like them to achieve, and then I would focus on them. Even if the entire class is remedial, there's still a 20% that is really, really below and need to focus on them. Does that make sense? Is that still in line with Valerie's comments? We're testing out ideas here. Okay.
Yes. Jessica says yes.
I saw it in the chat. I clicked. I said, look to the left. There it was. So this is a segue in our presentation to the second part of our main topic, and Valerie will have many more opportunities in the next few minutes to share some ideas with you about very specific tools. I wanted to come back to this idea of EdTechogogy. The word came to mind in a brainstorming session with friends and colleagues as we were mashing together educational technology and pedagogical practices, and realized there really isn't a term to get us beyond what people think about educational technologies, and we often look at the tool before we think about the practice. For us as educators and as we work with credential candidates, we know it has to be pedagogically based. It has to start with goals and objectives. Then we figure out what EdTech tools we want to use. So our word, EdTechogogy, is really a multiplication effect that occurs when we use the right educational technology tool with the right pedagogical practice and bring those two things together. And they are more powerful working together than they would be just independently. And that's where the origins of that word. And by the way, you're the first to know. It's the first time we talked about it. Everyone likes to be on the inside, right? Oh, Val.
Totally. And we did make up that word. So
Totally, yes. You couldn't. I don't think you'll find a definition for the word. At least I hope not. I want it to be our word.
Yes. So am I taking on this part, Steve?
Yeah, you know, I didn't build links. I was just happy I found these clever little icons in Sway that let me search the web and I could pull these icons in.
Yeah.
So we're open-ended here. What would you like to say, or how can I support you in talking about Sway or Nearpod or Book Creator?
So the really important part is we got to find out what the objective is for what we're trying for students to achieve in terms of technology, right? So the choices are like there's an abundant amount of choices of what we want to use. And the idea is you want to start off with the tools that you know well. And then from there, you can kind of play a little bit. So Steve just learned about Sway, and I love Sway personally because it really helps my students focus on the content, especially middle school students. And I know all of us at some point have this idea, like we play with so much of the presentational aesthetic aspect that the content may sometimes get lost. So with Sway, it actually asks you to tell, it's like you're telling a digital story and it organizes it in a way where it just says, here's your title, here are your words, put in your images that you want. And then boom, you like Sway takes care of the design for you. So in terms of not giving your students the burden of designing something that is visually and aesthetically pleasing, Sway is kind of a good presentation tool that takes all of that out, and it's not as stressful as, say, a Google Slides or a PowerPoint where they have a blank slide that they're working on.
Right. Less tools, fewer tool options. And once you understand what the limitations are, as I experienced today, I began to figure out how I could work within the limitations and then take advantage of some of the neat features, like this Ken Burns effect that keeps happening with the image that's in the background. Well, it just does it when you select animate. That's kind of cool.
So there is that. And then in Nearpod, I am a huge proponent and fan of Nearpod simply because you can create your synchronous lessons and you can also create a full-on asynchronous lesson that is student-paced, that moves at their speed while having checks for understanding within it. So it could be that you have a few slides, maybe you are an English teacher, right? And you're talking about alliteration. So what exactly is alliteration? You show them a little video on the explanation of alliteration. You have a few examples, and then boom, 3 slides in, you can enter in a quiz that they have. You can have them put in examples. You could have a collaboration board of different alliterations that they could come up with just to check for their understanding to see if they know what it's about before they move on to the next piece of content that you want to present to them. So you can have like a full on like 100 slide deck, like a slide deck of 100 more things, right? With things that are put in place to check for understanding. And you as a teacher can see at every time when they understood something or when they needed help. And so the students can go in this asynchronous learning for this lesson for the entire week using all of those slides. And Nearpod also has the immersive reader in it so that it can read the instructions to your students and all of the open-ended responses. It also lets the students record their responses as opposed to typing it in, which is an amazing tool to have for some of our friends who may have a harder time expressing themselves in writing as opposed to speaking. And Book Creator is just one of my super all-time favorite tools, because you get to write stories or write comments or paragraphs or just have an entire storytelling event through putting in pictures where you get to add in your voice, or you can add in other files, sound files or videos, and compile it all together. And it can be a collaborative work that you share with your entire classroom. So those are 3 ideas that you can use in your classroom or in your lessons with an objective in mind of what you're trying to achieve. I hope that made sense.
Questions from the audience, from you all? Are you familiar with any of these 3 tools that Valerie just described? And are you familiar with them? And then to what degree do you actually use any of them? You can unmute yourself and talk, or if you prefer to chat, we're both monitoring that as well. Flipgrid has released a bunch of new updates as well, like just this week.
Yes.
And last week, I understand.
Yeah, they pushed
and
it out.
Darylyn is, what do you know what they did, Val?
They did a ton of stuff. I can't even go into details of how much they did because I'm still trying to learn all the new things that they've added. So yeah, and Nearpod is about to fuse together with Zoom so that students don't have to travel between a Zoom window and the Nearpod window anymore. So it's kind of amazing. There's a lot of new things coming out.
I work primarily in the Canvas learning management system and have found ways to integrate Flipgrid, works effectively well. And now also Google Drive applications can work within Canvas and many other third-party applications. It's easier for me to explore how different EdTech tools mash together when I'm helping someone. Either a client or a friend has a question, and then it's easier for me to invest the time in figuring out what all the different combinations can be. So lots of response about Flipgrid and Nearpod. Highly recommend those as good workflows. As Valerie said, I learned Sway yesterday just watching. I was her wingman in her session. And then when I was talking about building the presentation for today, she says, well, why don't you use Sway? And so I got up early this morning and said, well, let's see if I can put my content into Sway and figure out how to bring it all together. And I have to admit, once I got through my own frustration of trying to accomplish what was in my head versus what Sway would allow me to do, I got into the rhythm of what does Sway allow me to do and how do I maximize that?
Mm-hmm. And it is a different mind shift, or it's a different workflow that you have when you're working in Sway compared to working in Slides.
Yes, yes. It certainly. Well, wait a second. If you're not familiar with Sway, let me break out of the presentation part or display part of Sway and go back to the storyline editor. And Valerie did this yesterday, and I said, what happened to all the beautiful stuff? Well, the beautiful stuff just shows up when you play your Sway. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, building it is building these cards or these blocks of information. So figuring out that the gray boxes were blocks of information and the individual cards within them are the things that would display, I began to unlock the possibilities. So then if you just want text, you also have options of how big or how small the text is going to be, whether you're going to choose to use bullets or not. You can number them or not. You can even add emphasis in different places. Emphasis is bold, accent is italicized,
Yeah.
which by the way, are not graphic design terms at all. That's not typography. But I got off my elitist high horse and figured out how to make it work. Building that group stack. In this case, I just, for the presentation of the online excellent practices in online learning, it was just a sequence that became like a slideshow. But then I have yet to show you what this other part is about. You can have cards that stack on top of each other. And that's a clever way to do it. Editing is just like any word processor. In fact, to start this way, I just uploaded a Microsoft Word document that had my content in it, and it decided what was a heading and what was the title. And then it allowed me to edit the information. So it minimizes the amount of creativity, but then you gain back focused time for your learners to really just pay attention to the parts of communicating their message that are important.
Anna brings up a good point in that Sway's
Yes.
presentation is unpredictable and we don't get what we plan. And yes, that is like the beauty and the downfall of Sway, right? Where there is that unpredictability, but at the same time, it really helps you concentrate on what the content is. And you get to decide if you want it to be like if it's a text box, if you want it to be a small text or a medium text or a large text, and the same thing for the images. So you do have some control in that. And once you know the setting that you're in, like the colors that it's going to be in, of what the different sizes look like, then you get to kind of play with it. So Steve, if you want to make the How Might We Design instruction with EdTech and Pedagogy, you have it on the large size right now. If you want to make it into the small size, hold on, click on it again. Just click on the box. Click on the text card.
The text
You see how on the bottom you have, right under your title, you have the text card. So start here. Where's the goal of the lesson? So click on
down
that.
Here.
Yep. And then
Got
you see
it.
right beside the trash can, you have it on the side, on the big size. Click it on the small size and then click play.
It'll be tiny.
Well, so then you get to understand how what it looks like here then in this sense, right? So then you see right away, so you do have some control of how it is going to look. Okay. Yeah, you do have to sway your hand on it, Artie. So once you know what it looks like in this presentation, then you can be like, okay, so I want all of the ones with the lines, and that's going to be the big text. And I want my stack to be really big or really small. Maybe I want my stack to not be on the bottom. I want it to be on the side of my text. Then that you have to make it into a small one. So there is a certain understanding in how Sway organizes its information. And then once you understand that, then you would know exactly which buttons you want to press without spending hours and hours playing with the font sizes and images and all that stuff like you would in a Google Slides presentation.
Oh, Valerie, I never spend hours and hours choosing typefaces, organizing lines, getting Bitmojis to fit. Oh,
yeah, we don't ever do that.
Never.
Never, ever.
Well, friends, Valerie and I are cruising into a closing for our time. We want to make sure that we leave room to answer more questions, a broader set of questions. The last part of our presentation is really about a process for merging, for doing the EdTech and the pedagogy together. And this is a 1 through 6 step process that I commonly use when I'm working with teachers who are trying to design a lesson. I say, well, okay, let's do basic lesson design. Typically, I choose McTighe and Wiggins backward design. Let's start with the goal of the lesson. What's the end result that you want? Then let's work backward from there. Figure out what are the learning objectives? What is each in the right chunk for the right size for the audience that you're trying to reach? How much can you teach them to get them to the goal, and how many of those little chunks might you need? And those become your learning outcomes. Oh, by the way, if you want to know more about learning objectives, there are 2 links just below to two different websites to tell you about Bloom's taxonomy, which is really helpful for finding the verbs that you need in order to do the learning outcomes. Moving on from there, you go, okay, now I know what I want my learners I know what I want them to know or be able to do. What tech tools might I use to accomplish that purpose? Notice I didn't start with the tech tool and say, how am I going to integrate Sway into my teaching and learning? I started with the goal and the objectives, and then I decide to Sway really help me do that. One of the important things that Val and I have been talking about is how we help each other, but we are just 2 people out of a larger group who help one another figure out presentations and technology tools, which is still part of another group, which is called Q, and we're 27,000 members, which is free membership, by the way, to tap into this network. Well, how do we communicate with each other? Twitter, Facebook, Instagram is another place that teachers are often posting resources that might be helpful. And Val and I, TikTok too?
There aren't a lot of us on TikTok, but there are a lot of educators on TikTok sharing their ideas as well.
Whatever the source is, whatever the medium is that you can tap into that helps you reach these teachers, get their ideas, get their resources, that's what we need. Testing it out, as Val and I did day before yesterday to get her presentation up and running was a great way to talk through the tool and the presentation to build out different ideas. And even in the few minutes before this presentation, she was giving me some guidance on how to make certain things happen or how to change the look of the layout to better fit our ideas. Here's some resources that are linked. So Val sends me a message and she says, oh, we should share these great tutorials. This is a massive spreadsheet of teacher tutorials on the far left, student and parent tutorials on the far right for different kinds of applications that are commonly used in teaching and learning. So I encourage you to go check those 2 out. Higher Education EdTechogogy is a page of resources. It's a Google site that I built to put together some resources and materials because higher ed faculty were asking me questions. And so I pulled together some presentations and some tutorials that I had built. This last idea of a resource is, once again, it's our Q organization, which has been a lifeblood for the work that Valerie and I do with teachers. And in honor of my friend and colleague, I put the sun. Thank you.
It's so kind.
Didn't want you to miss that. Did not want you to miss that.
Thank you so much for putting that in. And thank you all of you for being here. And in case you missed it, this is the link for our Sway so that you can
Val.
go through and click on all of the wonderful items. Steve, if you want to scroll up to those 2 gigantic parent and teacher resources, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. There are some awesome educators who came together to make these tutorials that really teaches teachers how to use these tools and have a student and parent tutorial as well to help them through. You don't have to reinvent the wheel, okay? Take a look at these, and they're created, as you can see, it's Jake Tech Miller, History Sandoval with Amanda Sandoval, Eric Curtis, Megan Venezia. I have a hard time saying her name. But these are all really awesome people who have been, who are EdTech gurus in one way or another and have created tutorials for everybody. So, you can happily share this and use this with your students and parents, and even for yourself. And feel free to share them away as well. Okay?
Valerie, thank you for reminding me that the contributors are actually teachers and EdTech professionals that we know in Q. Yes. So it isn't just a tutorial about how to use something, which any technically oriented person could write, but rather you're listening to the mind of an educator who's describing an EdTech tool and a practice that's useful and tried and tested by them in their own classroom settings. So it's got validity. Got validity.
Yes, there's definitely validity right there. So thank you, Artie, for coming. Thank you, Anima, for coming. Thank the rest of you for coming as well. Monique for being here. Darylyn for being here as well. Jessica, thank you for all your input.
Yes.
Laurel, thank you very much as well. You know, we're all here and we make each other better, right? So Melinda, thank you for being here as well. Thank you, thank you. And if you have any questions, we're definitely here to help answer your questions for you.
Thank
We'll
you,
hang out.
Valerie. I'll catch you guys on the next session.
Yeah, I don't think we have a next session.
You don't? Okay.
we don't have a next session together.
Wishful thinking.
Yeah, but you can always reach out to us on Twitter or via email if you have questions. This is me. This is Steve. And Steve, I always forget your email. It is McGriff right?
It's McGriffSteven@gmail.com.
Steven@gmail.com. There you go. You can reach both of us pretty easily.
Yes.
And we are here to help you because as we say in Q, like what John Carippo's idea is, we offer lifetime tech assistance, lifetime tech support. So we are here to help you because all of us are here together.
Yes, and if I can ever help with anything, feel free to reach out and let me know. I will follow you both on Twitter.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'll catch up with you. So this isn't bye, it's just see you later.
Yes.
So see you later. You bet. Thank you.
See you later. Thank you so much.
All righty.
Thanks for taking some time to join us today. So I'll find the stop recording button. I know it's here somewhere. Oh, there.
There you go.
The same place I